Greetings and welcome to the Black Room. This is the podcast for all things erotic mind control, and I am your host, Callidus, joined once again by Madam Kistulot, and welcome back.
Pleasure to be here.
As for me, and it has been a little while since we've been with you. I can't remember when episode 15 came out now, but it has been a little bit. And basically, the reason that we've been away is that I've been kind of under the weather. I've been just dealing with kind of a medical issue that has taken a little bit of time to get over, but feeling better now. Everything's fine. Everything's still attached. Everything's still working. So thank you for the concern over the thing that you didn't know that I had. But we're back. We're all fine now. How are you?
Oh, yeah, that sounded really nasty. Really glad that we could get you back in, like, so quickly, honestly. I think it was back in March. Would have had to have been.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That was not quick.
No, not at all. But we are back now and very happy to be here with you. Before we get started, I guess let's go ahead and pass around some links for those of you who might be catching the show and are not sure everything that we're going to be talking about in the show today. You can find in the show notes, which is on the show's official website. You can find that easily at podcast.callidus-mc.com, where you can also find my photo manipulation, artwork, video work, and that sort of thing. If you're looking for me on Tumblr, which I am on Tumblr quite a bit, and it's an easy place to see what's going on and get in touch with me, that is callidus-mc.tumblr.com. And if you'd like to find some of Madame Kistulot's amazing fiction, you can do so on her website. Why don't you tell them where to find you?
I'm over at madamkistulot.net, and I was really trying to do the Tumblr thing really hard for a while. I've gotten so busy with writing and other weird stuff around it that I haven't been on there quite as much. But madamkistulot.tumblr.com, you can find me on there too. And I know there's a lot more people there than over on Twitter. I'm the same thing there. But just Madame Kistulot basically everywhere. It's really convenient having a word you basically own on the internet.
Yes, I envy you. As I think I might have said in the last couple of episodes, I envy you. It really bugs me that I have to add the MC to the end of my name to distinguish myself, because when I first started calling myself Callidus, I was the only person around that was doing it, and now they are legion. And anyway, so. But yes, I envy you. And also, you're kind of being modest here, but you can also find Madame Kistulot and her vast library of erotic mind control fiction at the Erotic Mind Control Story Archive, which of course is mcstories.com. All right, so let's move on to the news. And in the news, you're going to be delighted to know that Uzubono, the amazing 3D poser artist and comic book writer extraordinaire, who often works with Tabaco on a series that we mention on almost every episode of the show.
It's so good.
Called Core. Uzubono also has another comic series that she works on. This is her own comic. She's writing and doing the artwork in this one. It's called The Division. It's currently in its, I can't remember if this is sort of the second or third cycle, but this specific incarnation of The Division is The Division, Aria of the Hive, and issue number 8 is due out this Friday, May 11th, and we're excited about that, aren't we?
Yeah, I'll admit, I've continually meant to actually catch up on them, because when I first came across them, it was because of Core, and it keeps being one of those things that gets pushed back. So as someone who's read some of them, not that you really need to, because Uzubono's art is so poser art can be looked at as just, they're using poser, but Uzubono really knows how to draw out facial expressions and posing and just
lighting.
Really gets the most out of the software you possibly can, and stuff I know you can't get out of the software. So pretending that that's not enough to make anyone read this, what would you say sums up what it's got going for it as far as storytelling and what its own special unique stuff is?
It's like the Death Star of erotic mind control.
Oh, damn.
It's one day you're just going about your life doing your thing, and then suddenly a shadow passes across your entire planet, and you look up and a false eclipse is occurring because of an object in the sky that blots out all other things. And it is Uzubono's amazing 3D poser artwork and erotic mind control dabblings.
Well,
Dabbling seems to sort of actually diffuse the impact I was going for with that analogy, but Usabono's the bomb.
well, I mean, if that's just what you get from dabblings, then I don't know. That kind of pumps it
Yeah,
up even more.
I don't.
Makes
Yeah,
me scared what happens.
like what happens if she really tries? Yeah, Usabona's amazing. I think that we all, and I know people. I email with people. I've talked to people about Usabono who are like, I'm not really into poser. I'm not really into poser artwork, and I understand that because it's easy to be bad at. It's really, really easy to be bad at poser artwork, and the number of people who are really, really good at it are, you can probably count on your hands. People like Usabono, people like Doll Mistress, people like Technophile. There are some people who are really, really good at it. And the thing about Usabono that's amazing is that I feel like she has sort of carved her way into that group really quickly. And just a few short years, she's really taken it and run with it. We're big, big fans of her. She's amazingly talented, as Madame Kistulot was saying here. It's amazing how expressive and just how it's amazing how immersive her comics are, and she she's the total package in terms of the expressions on the faces, the posing, the panel layout, backgrounds, compositing, effects, and the writing on top of all of that. She's firing on all thrusters. So if you haven't checked out any of her stuff before, there's plenty that you can go and check out. It's all free on her DeviantArt page, which is usabono.deviantart.com. Also, I think it'd be worth giving a shout out that you can find her work on MC Comics with an X, COMIX, mccomics.com. Her work is available in the free area there as well, along with some other really talented people. MC Comics is a pay site. They have a free area, but they have you can subscribe, you can get a membership and go into the members only area, and there's a lot of great artists and fun to be had there as well.
Yeah, they have some really solid work. I had a subscription for a brief time, like ages ago at this point, excuse me, finances and so forth. But no, yes. Definitely not a thing I regret having done.
No, nor I. Next up in the news, I almost can't believe we're going to say this, but why don't you tell them what's next to the news?
So a bit back, you may remember a couple of podcasts talking about some obscure legendary author, Eye of Serpent, and ended up sending an email off informing about the podcast and just saying just how touching and just really powerful those stories were, and got a response back. It happened to be during a time when I was traveling, so I was just thinking, oh gosh, between a couple of emails, because I got a response back after 2 weeks, and I sent more, and it's like, oh no, I'm coming off as that way too obsessive person. Of course no one's going to want to respond. But then no, just got busy, and that makes perfect sense. But now I is back, has done some stuff which we'll talk about a bit later, but there is some new prose by Eye of Serpent, and I mean, it's pretty exciting to be a part of that, I'd have to say.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm trying to think of, certainly there have been kind of on again, off again authors over the years, people who have gone on long hiatus and everything, but I don't know that I ever officially announced her retirement, but she was out for years. Yeah. She was out of the game, and her just her work was sort of this monolith that again with the shadow casting metaphors, but it cast a long shadow over the erotic mind control fiction community. The fact that we may have had, and really I have to say you in particular, because it was your idea to do the deep dive into Eye of Serpent's fiction. So really, I have to defer to you as well. But the fact that you and me to a lesser extent had anything to do with her coming back is amazing, incredibly gratifying. And I also will say on a personal note that I left a couple of very nice comments on my website in response to the shows that we did, and you've never heard a grown man giggle like a child more than I was seeing that. That was pretty fun.
And these take a lot of effort. Like especially last podcast, I had a bunch of disconnection issues with my cord due to just various room issues.
Yeah,
it's just completely flawless to listen to.
Room
So counts.
Room issues.
Well, I have a very tight space, so like seriously, like
stop.
Oh gosh, I wasn't even thinking that. There's a lot of effort put into these, so just like that's not unearned. And honestly, I wouldn't have gotten around to it. I've been thinking about doing it for years. So
yeah.
Thank you for giving me a reason, and just seriously, I thank you for being back. It's been really great to see you as a part of the community again. I'll never forget the time that you spotted what's the full title? Halloween Screams, thing it was, my anthology, and just I literally have a picture of that I keep around as a little Eye of Serpent read and reviewed one of my stories. It makes me happy. So it's really great to have another, because I think that literally the year that I posted their last story was the same year that I started posting. So it's one of those weird sort of like I don't think we were ever in more than like maybe 3 or 4 updates together, but it's sort of a nice sort of thing.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back, we are, and I'm sure we're not only speaking for ourselves.
Oh yeah.
We are delighted to see you active in the community again. Speaking of active in the community, we've talked at least once or twice about Discord, and I think Discord is kind of making the rounds. I think everybody's kind of aware of it, getting into it. If you don't know, Discord it's a text and voice chat application, and you can download it and you can create a server and people can join and you can chat about myriad things. And the erotic mind control community has discovered Discord in a big way, and the Garden of MC, of which we are all big fans, as it's an excellent community. The Garden of MC's got a Discord server, which Madam Kistulot and others are working very hard to make an awesome place to be and to hang out and discuss erotic mind control fiction and all other kinds of related topics. And the community is doing some pretty cool things. Talk about just some of the regular things that you guys are doing, events and stuff like that, for people who might not know.
Well, I was like just a little bit of that, just a little bit nervous. It's like nothing too big. But one thing is that typically Saturday evenings, at least evenings my time over Pacific, or somewhere around like 5 or 7 or so, to whenever people are still able to breathe, not breathe, but keep our eyes open.
Right.
That has a totally different context in this community.
It does indeed. I was,
but just chatting away about everything. I mean, we start out in very, noble terms. We're talking about, the update, because, Saturday tends to be when Simon updates these days, which is really a boon. I wasn't horribly sad back in the days when it was Sundays, but Saturdays makes me even happier. Talking about all of that sort of thing. And then like literally anything will come up over the course of it. But since everything can come back to mind control, it always eventually does. Sharing all kinds of different stories, not even just on the archives. Like Tumblr is a hard place for me to keep up with. At least I'm reaching that point where I feel like I don't think like I'm too good for Tumblr. I'm thinking like I need to grow a little bit younger to understand how to navigate Tumblr properly. So not missing out on great stories. For example, Ari, whom you might have read some of her amazing shorts on Tumblr, hangs out there and is constantly linking them and getting to, if you show up, you might be able to give feedback before something pops up. All kinds of various discussions, sharing various pictures that are coming up. If people get commissions, they tend to get thrown up there before anyone gets to see them. And, hey, join us. It's lots of fun. And there's really no, like, the only thing is just, we're there to chat and have a good time. So, as long as you're on board with that, we're happy to have you.
And I guess it would be worth saying, just because there are a lot of Discord servers that are specifically geared towards this, the garden is not a trance server. Like, in other words, people are not going there to hook up with like a hypnotist and to do trance play and things like that.
Yeah, there's a section off to the side, because it turns out you get enough hypno kinksters in a room, eventually someone's going to
someone's going to pull out a pocket watch.
Yeah, so so there's a spot off to the side, but the part that I know that makes a lot of people have mentioned to me specifically makes them happy about the Garden Discord server specifically is that the focus on fiction means that I mean people might. I'm not going to say no one flirts because we're a bunch of adults. That's going to happen, but the focus on the fiction means that there's much more discussion about literature and other forms of fiction media, movies, etc., as opposed to just a focus on the reality of it. Which I mean, I like the reality of it. I practice, but I mean, personally, sometimes I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the outlandish stuff. I don't want to think about swinging a pocket watch. I want to see a parasite crawl into someone's ear, and we're there for that.
You and me both. All right. Thank you very much for bringing us that update. If you have not checked out the Garden of MC Discord server, check the link in the show notes for the Black Room episode 16. We'll have it there if you want to go and join and see what all the hubbub is about. All right, now speaking of keeping it on the fiction, we're going to move into the required reading section, and we're going to talk about some fiction because there are a number of stories that have been going up recently that really have gotten me excited. And I think you'll agree with me that there are times where it seems like the kinds of stories that are to my taste kind of ebb and flow on the archive, and you'll go through dry spells where you're just not reading the kinds of things that you really want to be reading. And we're not in one of those times right now.
No.
It's very, very, very nice. I'm very, very happy about where things are right now. We're going to talk about, first up, we're going to talk about the first story from a new author. The story is called You, spelled Y-E-W, and it is by Valasanya the Pale, an author who has just joined. This is the first story they posted that was added back on the 14th of April, so a little under a month ago now. 2 chapters as of this recording, and Chapter 3 is expected out with the update this weekend on May the 12th. So it's humming right along, and it's getting better and better every time. I'll go ahead and read the synopsis just to whet your appetite a little bit here. Lilith Yu, powerful leader of the Martian colonization movement, faces off against the pernicious influence of the rival hive colony of slave mistress Isis Pines. So basically, I'm an easy mark because if the word hive is in the description for your story, gonna read it. Read it, guaranteed. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, it really works.
Oh. This story comes from a fine pedigree of influences
Yes.
that it wears on its sleeve, and I think that there's one thing to be said for trying to do something completely different. But if something inspires you and you run with it and you give all due credit, because especially with the way the archive works, you should mention when something's inspiring you. This is definitely a story that takes on what's come before and builds on it. I mean, there are bits I can recall just like, oh, I can totally see where this comes from Hive, which is it always kind of makes me giggle a little bit. What was that one trilogy started with? Hive. Or Rouge, in just really good ways where it doesn't feel like it's doing just those stories again, but the fact that those stories happened before not only just influenced it, but it's building off of aspects of them that weren't necessarily explored before, which is why I always say, I was joking with Valasanya earlier today on the Garden of MC, and he said, hey, have you ever written this idea? Because if not, I'm going to steal it. And I said, we should both do it and then argue for fun over who did it better while everyone else just gets to read it.
Who wrote it better? Who wrote it better? I will personally, I'll personally do up the meme gifs to go along with that mock discussion. I think that You is a fantastic piece where, like you say, where's the influence on its sleeve? You see where the jumping off point is. You're already familiar with the foundation of influence that the story builds itself on, and yet it's got its own thing going. It's got its own things to say. I think the fundamentals of the story are terrific. Characters, pacing, and it's inventive. It's got some imagination to the twists and turns that you'll go on, or just sort of the things that you'll see and experience along the way. It's terrifically fun, and I love the Hive, the mind control Hive, as a subgenre of MC fiction. It's one of my favorites, just because so many of my favorite authors have have taken a swing at it over the years, and and generally speaking, it always works out really great. Uh, but I really do love it, and it's fantastic to see such a terrific addition to that catalog, within this Hive subgenre, coming from a first-time author on the archive. That it's a really, really kind of great opening statement from this individual, and
Oh, definitely.
we wish Valensania the Pale all the best. We're really looking forward to both Chapter 3 and whatever else might be coming down the pipe. And I've been talking with him a little bit, and I won't say anything, just because I wasn't, we weren't on the record when we were discussing it, but
Yeah.
just having spoken with him a little bit and hearing some of his ideas and the things that he might be doing in the future, I'm very, very excited to see more work from him. I think we're all going to benefit from his
Oh,
talent.
the thing that I think I would say as like if everything you've heard already doesn't sell you is that if you're like me and you want to read a story, like I can get into an MC story that's just starts out with the victim in front of the controller or even already taken over and continuing going and just under 2K, just very tight, nice heat.
Yeah.
But the things that I really remember are the stories where it takes some time to develop a setting, especially if it's going to be a bizarre setting.
Sure.
And being set in space, this definitely needed to take some time to lay the groundwork for it to be as accessible as it is. And it does it. We have a varied cast of characters that all feel very much like they're real and alive and that their decisions are flowing very naturally. I would read this story if it wasn't hot. And the fact that it is hot just makes it so it's basically, I don't know, I'm getting this for free and it's this good. I basically feel like I'm cheating. And the effort put into the world building alone would be worth reading the story, and I feel like that's the least impressive thing in the story. Which I don't mean that insult to. I just mean
no.
That's how good it is that I would read it just for that.
It is really fantastic. I think especially one of the things that I really, really got into was the character of Yu, of Lilith Yu. It's really interesting to kind of see the journey she goes on, particularly in chapter 2. But she's like this. A lot of the story, you're kind of inside of her head, and you're kind of sharing all these things that she's wrestling with. And I especially love some of the conflict and things that come up in the course of this, and it's those kinds of problems that she faces, the sort of no-win scenarios that she encounters along the way, and what she ultimately decides to do in the face of these things. I really, really dig some of the twists and turns it takes. It's stuff that is not immediately obvious to me, and I really like it when characters and stories can surprise me still.
Yeah, and I was like in love with her from the very first paragraph. I mean, we instantly see she's passionate and will not put up with being told the world is completely garbage for everyone involved. And even though we don't see, I mean, there's time taken to tell us, like, because as it says in the tin, this takes place on Mars. There's still time taken to let us know what's like on Earth so we can see the comparison. And it's just instantly we see that this is the character that we should care about. And that I can't tell you many stories that have me completely invested in the main character in less than 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, that's an accomplishment, no doubt. So go read it. That is the bottom line. Go read this story. It's going to be worth your time. I think that you've got plenty of time between now and the weekend to catch up on the first 2 chapters. Slow build. There, the heat begins to kind of come into it towards the end of the first chapter, but you're going to get all that great world building, all the great characters, and plus it's going to really allow you to immerse yourself in the Hive as a location and really get a clear picture in your mind, so that moving forward you can have a lot of fun with all of the naughty hot things that happened in chapter 2 and forward. So,
Oh.
YEW, it's on mcstories.com. Go check it out. Links are in the show notes. The next story that we want to talk about, it would be easy to accuse us of favoritism in this next instance, given the fact that Kistulot is the author is a good friend of yours.
Oh yeah, we've like actually I think right now the longest friend I've had, and we've been together pretty steady for a good 2-3 years at this point, maybe 4.
Right. So again, it'd be easy to accuse us of mentioning her and this story that she's been working on since mid-March, called Canary. 7 parts so far, 6 honest to goodness chapters and 1 interlude that are on the archive. It'd be easy to accuse us of playing favorites if it weren't so damn good.
Seriously.
It's so good. And again, similar to you, this is the first time, or this is the first story that she's got on the archive.
And she got an email that, like, I'm not gonna like be spilling all of her secrets, but the other day I actually got an email of someone accusing her. Oh, of course. There's no way this is her first story. And I've been talking with her for years. She's run a couple of really good role-playing campaigns I've been a part of, but she's never put pen to paper before, which I always thought was sad because she's like one of the few writers that I can never guess what her twists are, but I always feel like I should have seen it coming once the last piece is dropped in my lap, and I can always see, oh, if I would have paid attention to this, I would have known.
Yeah, those are always the best.
It translates wonderfully to her prose. There's nothing lost, even though you lose the interactive aspect you get when you're sitting across a table. It's all still so intense.
Yeah, it's a terrific story. I can't remember. Did you check with her? Can we confirm that the next part is coming this weekend on the May 12th update?
Oh yeah. No, there's the way that everything's been going. Unless something goes wrong, at least I think she's got a buffer of a couple weeks. But that could change as things had a horrible bit of technical issues today. But I wouldn't imagine that would be a problem. Worst case scenario, I can bundle it up and throw it out from her Dropbox. But there should be more this weekend, and every chapter I read of this, I'm like, okay, well, that was really good. So, I'm ready for it. And then I'm just like, wait, how did you get even more screwed up than you were before? This is amazing. Because it's so twisted and dark. To throw the synopsis out here is just, it sounds so innocent.
It does.
Oriel attends a BDSM play party that caters to women with psychic gifts. That sounds like it could be one of the stories that's just, oh yeah, a couple people met up at a hypnosis con.
Yeah.
And it's not.
It'd be so easy for this to be kind of pedestrian and like a wish fulfillment story that's a little bit specific, or maybe a little bit too diffuse or something like that. And I mean, honestly, it's so not that. I mean, it's so spot on. It's about a character who you're inhabiting the whole story. She's really fantastic. All the other characters are so well drawn and so vivid in your imagination. They're such great characterizations, and they just get you. They get you from the onset, and like you said, it is dark and twisted. And she says right up front, my stories tend to involve these things, and if you're freaked out by matters of consent and and all this stuff, then it might not be the story for you. But it's terrific, and I think you and I agree that one of our new favorite characters ever is Amelia, who is one of these psychic women attending the psychic women play party. And Amelia is she is the sickest, twisted, darkest, most vile character, one of the most characters that I've ever read, and I love her. She's terrific.
She's right up there with Joss.
I agree. I'm almost afraid to say it because it seems so, like it almost seems sacrilegious, but I mean, she is. Amelia is right up there with Trilby's Joss. What an amazing character.
Oh, what was it that someone said on the forum the other day? The Canary gives you all those great feelings, like one of Trilby's happy stories, where someone, shoots a loved one or commits suicide, and it's not wrong.
Yeah. I mean, like really reading this story, and I hate to seem as as if I'm pandering, because you two are so close.
Yeah.
I It felt like a Trill story to me. Reading Canary, I mean, it's a tremendous effort. I'm so happy with it, and as I've told her since last we spoke, but I'm just dying to get more of this. I'm so excited to see where she takes it.
Because if you want an MC story that's not going to shy away from the fact that what people do in MC stories are twisted and fucked up and wrong, and
Yeah.
you should feel bad about it while you're masturbating furiously,
Yeah,
this is a story for you. It's not
that's
always hot. It's got those moments of just plot, but I think that makes it better because you
yeah.
get that investment.
Well, and again, pacing. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's tension has got to build and release, erotic tension or otherwise. Uh, if you do the same thing the whole time, then it becomes a flat line. It becomes
Oh
boring. Even if the content itself is terrific, if you don't have the pacing, the cake doesn't bake.
now I want to know what an MC story set to one of Cake's songs would sound like for people
Oh,
not in the know. Very, very moderate tempo the whole way through, no real change. But no, yeah, definitely. Like I'm jealous of people who get to wait till it's completely done. I mean, I don't have the patience at this point. I'm way too invested. But
yeah.
I will be really interested to see what people think when they can just go from start to finish, or if it'll be like the day that I watched all of Evangelion in a watch and was just depressed for a week because it's intense.
Yeah, it is. It is an intense tale, and really, really good. Remember what I said at the top about sort of the ebb and flow of content on the archive that appeals to me, and I'm telling you right now, I'm sitting pretty flush, and I am so happy about it. And Canary is just one of the reasons why, but a big reason.
It's just really good. Definitely give it a look. And I mean, obviously, feel free to not take my word for it. I don't think you should. I think you should read it. And even if you fall off, let her know because there's nothing better than hearing a sadistic writer's giggle when she hears that someone can't take her story. Not in like an insulting way. Like this stuff is legitimately going to make some people feel so uncomfortable they're not going to be able to read it, and I respect that because it's not just it's sexy darkness. Some of this is just literal bad times darkness.
Yes.
But hey, writers like to know when they hit those marks, even if it doesn't work for you. It's fun to know.
That's very, very true. Speaking of somebody who's not afraid to explore the darkness, the last story in the required reading section is from a very established author now on the archive. Although I think that she was first mentioned on the show way back when. I'd have to go. I can't remember what episode number, but anyway, when I first became aware of her, I mentioned Connie Kay on the podcast in the long, long ago, and liked her stuff then, and like her stuff now. She's got a multi-parter that she is working on right now called Returned. It was originally added on April 28th. Got another infusion on the May 5th update, and definitely hoping, although I should reach out to her, which I have not done, to find out if we're going to see a third part this weekend. But it's terrific. I'll give you the synopsis just so you can kind of be thinking about this. A detective and a psychologist try to uncover a hypnosis-controlled slave ring with the help of a former slave and rescue her missing friends. All right, so that in and of itself entices me. I like the sound of that, but what I was really delighted to find out, as the title should have tipped me, is that Returned is actually a sequel to one of my favorite Connie Kay stories, which is Turned. And it continues that tale. We find out more about the aftermath of those characters, and of course the mind control slave ring in question is the same one that's explored in Turned. Now, if you haven't read Turned, that's a story from last April. The synopsis of that story is two women who create and sell hypnosis-controlled slaves clash over their latest acquisition. Also a story not afraid to explore the darkness. I love Turned. As a matter of fact, Turned has one of, like, maybe one of my favorite scenes. It's got a terrific. There's a terrific moment. I really don't want to spoil it because even if I kind of tell you like
Yeah.
what kind of moment it is, it will
Then
reveal
you're ready
something.
for it.
Exactly. You'll be anticipating it. I don't want to do that. But there's a scene in Turned that I find really, really hot. And I can point to a couple of other stories by people like Tabaco and Trilby that have worked in similar kinds of things. And it really pushes my buttons. I like it a lot. And so the fact that Returned, follows up on that and continues, I'm thrilled. So I'm really, really enjoying this one. It's not quite as dark and scary yet as Canary, but the potential is there. Certainly, the potential for this to go places is there, and it's a story that, again, I mean, it treats the subject matter with respect. It acknowledges that the characters who experience these things are put through horrible, horrible circumstances, and it's not afraid to shy away from that and to really explore it. So I'm really loving it. That's another one that I highly recommend people check out.
And Connie's definitely a very solid writer in a lot of like really good ways. I mean,
Definitely.
definitely like because I haven't gotten around to this one yet, and I missed out on Turned. It was during one of the periods where like I'm gonna argue that even though like ebb and flow of what I personally want to read, the archive has always had plenty of good stuff coming out, even if you miss it, which is really easy to do because there's so many stories coming out. It's every week, and life can catch up with you.
True.
But that was during one of the time periods where I missed out. So I'm gonna have to go back and catch up on Turned because that sounds like I don't know why I'm like gonna be looking forward to it, but I can tell from a scene like that that's gonna be good because like I remember when I got an email from Connie ages ago, and I think it was when Empty was about to come out, and I got to take a look at that, give a little bit of just like feedback on that, and that was a really strong story then. And Connie's only continued to grow as a writer, so I look forward to seeing where Turned went. And I don't read a lot of Green just because like I'll be honest, I'm that boring person who only reads Pink, but I read plenty of stories that are just too good for me to, avoid, and I'm gonna have to give that one a look.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that this is a Green story because one thing I will say, and specifically, Returned is a Green story, whereas Turned is a Pink story. So far, and again, I don't know where it might be going. We're only 2 parts in, but so far in Returned, I'll give a slight spoiler warning here. Like, I'm going to reveal just a little bit about the plot. If you don't want to know anything, skip ahead a little bit. But a slight spoiler for Returned is that thus far, the male hypnosis has been of a vanilla variety. Like it's like a hypnotherapy kind of hypnosis going on, man to woman. So, if that in any way matters to you, if in any way you're you listening out there like hesitant, you're like, maybe it's not really my flavor. So far, that's been the case. Now again, that could change. That could change moving forward. Who knows where it's going to go? But I think, knowing you as I do, I think that so far what's happened in the story is still going to be firmly within your wheelhouse specifically.
Oh yeah, and as mentioned, like Connie's a good enough writer. Like I mean, I read through the entire Ancient Saga that was in the main line at least. I still have to read the side stories, which I feel bad about. But like the Quick and whatever series, like I feel bad that I can't remember the. I know it's like the Quick Knife stories. Those are all even yellow. And when a writer's good, it doesn't matter the colors. It's good writing.
Yeah.
And I can firmly believe that Connie's would be at the very least worth giving a look.
Yes, I agree with you. Returned by Connie K. If you hurry, you might be able to catch up on Canary and this, and you, by this weekend when, in theory, all 3 are going to see new parts, and then you're just going to be drowning in goodness at that point. So, yeah, check them out. All right. Last up in the required reading section, and no surprise, given what we talked about in the news section, we've got a story from Eye of Serpent. Take it away.
Oh, so I was super. This is also a thing. Thank you very much, Valasanya, for making it so I can't say you without it being confusing. And thank you, I, for making it so that talking about a writer makes it sound like I'm being self indulgent. I just had to get that out of the way because Discord calls very interesting when I'm talking about I and you, and it has nothing to do with me or the person I'm talking to.
This is true,
But
yes.
back in early April, out of nowhere, there was no preamble. We'd been exchanging some emails, but no, like, oh, by the way, this is going to happen or anything, which, I don't need to know about all these things in advance. Very pleasant surprise. I'm just on the Garden of MC and I see Eye of Serpent's posting. Responded to, in fact, a Connie K thread about favorite stories because Connie shares our love of Eye, which is not surprising. A lot of the community realizes how great Eye is, and was just commenting a little bit here and there. And then out of nowhere, a couldn't have been 700 word flash drops called By Another Name. And that'll be on the show liner notes. And it's spread throughout the thread for a bit, though no one could kind of step in and interrupt during it because it was just so good. But it's adorable and twisted and just all the things that make Eye stories great about a woman named Cal and her superheroine teen crush, Wondrous, meeting thanks to a villain named The Voice showing up and things not going the way that anyone would hope or expect for them to go. This is another one of those dark, twisted, screwed up stories. As a tiny bit of a spoiler, but also just like a content sort of warning, is that there's a brief bit of not happening to characters so much as like on a screen, but the BE tag comes into play. Bestiality. It's very much like a brief one over just to show how screwed with our characters are becoming.
Right.
But this is a story that really. I'm a big fan of CP stories, which is probably no surprise to anyone who lives in America. But there's superheroes, and then there's examining a superheroic world, examining these characters and making them likable, average people, and larger than life at the same time. And I had never done a comic book story before, and even not just on the archive, they mentioned specifically that this was just not something they'd done in prose before.
Right.
And you can't tell because this is some very well thought out examinations of the genre while also just being terribly twisted and hot and dark and even super adorable because I is one of those writers that can both reach into your chest and rip your still beating heart out and then open it up more and there's two girls kissing and it's cute.
Yay.
It's really good.
I can't wait to check it out. You told me about it, and I was thrilled. I was over the moon, and I'm going to sit down and read it in full and just gorge on it because again, I can't get over the fact that that Eye of Serpent is posting something new, and also the fact that it is a comic book themed story, and that is a whole new thing. There's something about that I love. I mean, it's not that I don't know. Like I hate to play favorites. Like it's not that I wouldn't have been any less excited if it had come out and it had been a continuation of the cycle of the ancients or something related to that. I wouldn't have been disappointed by that at all. But somehow the fact that it's something completely unexpected, completely different, makes it that much more enticing.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of bands as a sort of a very different metaphor where you pull out any of their albums, you can put it on, and you know what you're going to get.
Right.
But then there's the ones that it has their style, it has their sense of their depth, it has their instrumentation, but like Metallica doesn't have two albums sound identical. Alice in Chains doesn't have two albums sound identical.
Right.
There's these bands that can be themselves while also growing every time they do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very much the same thing. There's 9 flashes out so far in this series, which completes this one story. But I liked the response. And I definitely recommend reaching out if you give it a read and enjoy it, or if you give it a read and it makes you feel anything. Because as mentioned before, writers like knowing they affect people. And even just knowing, hey, this was really intense and hit me really hard. Maybe something else, though. I mean, like, people love feedback as long as it's, feedback. Yes. And this is a great time to get in on the floor of being able to say, I was one of the people that said I should write more, and then more came out. And it's impossible to not feel a little bit responsible, even if you know that, you were just encouragement.
Yeah.
really good. And like, I don't want to give like very much away because it's just so weird, and I feel like there's nothing I could say that wouldn't give something in some sort of way. But I've never seen such an interesting use of just power for the sake of unusual physical sex and just making a person different because of who and what they are. And it's really, really good, and it brings to mind all the best parts of reading about and learning about Carell, or seeing just all the great stories that Eyes had before. It's definitely a series that, if we get more of, which I'm really hoping we do, would be very much up there on my list of things that like I recommend to everybody. It's really good.
Eye of Serpent, new material. What else do you need to know? Check the show notes for the link. All right. Hopefully, you all have. If you already have read these stories, you know what we're on about, and if you haven't, hopefully we've given you enough incentive to go and check them out for yourselves, because they're excellent.
Yes.
And we guarantee that. There's really no material warranty that you can capitalize on should you disagree. We'll just tell you you're wrong, but you're not. I mean, and you're wrong. They're terrific. I don't even know why you're arguing about it. So, moving on. More awesome erotic fiction to discuss coming from us, obviously.
Yes.
Because we're moving into the shameless self-promotion section. We're going to talk about, or I say we're going to talk about, you're going to talk about, and I'm going to sit here and listen in delight. Talking about not the latest story, but a recent story from you called In a Hot Second, which went up when? April 21st, right?
Yes.
Yes. Starring a really, really, speaking of fun, lovable, yet humanized superhero characters, this story is all about a superhero known as Virtue. And she's an original character. Is this the first time you're writing her, or?
Well, she's an original character, and this is sort of where, when we were talking about things, and it was like, well, so because we were discussing this, and I thought it was a great idea. Let's take a little bit of time to talk to each other about some stuff we've been working on. And when we were sort of coming down what to talk about, and I was going to say, well, we can talk about Social Parasite, because it's technically, I wrote it because you mentioned we need more Parasite stories out there.
Yeah.
And then, but
And
in a
then
hot
you wrote
second,
one.
also, yeah, which, and I've really been happy about the response.
Yeah, it's
and
great.
in a hot second has the connection of Canaries coming up these days, and Virtue is actually a character that was created by Kistulot. Originally was created for a while back. I was, let's see, what game happened before? I can't remember anymore. We were sort of doing 2 games a week in my tabletop group.
I was going to say, this is like tabletop role-playing we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, our Wednesdays were the game that Kistulot was running, Chicago Knights, which was a group of superheroes set in Chicago. I still really love that pun, even if we didn't do as much at night as I was expecting. Definitely not vampires. But they did show up once. And then on Fridays, we were running a game set in the Midas City universe, Silver Girl, Omega Girl, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And there was sort of a joke for a while about, well, if I'm writing from Kistulot, well, if I'm making a character for there, then I mean, should I restrain myself from making fetish fuel? And I was just like, no, lean into it as hard as possible. Have fun with this. This is what you're supposed to do.
Step into it and swing.
Exactly. So we get a Catholic schoolgirl, which I don't know why I'd never thought of having one in that setting before, because it makes perfect sense for a place where, I forget when I started doing it. I'm pretty sure it was amidst the Electrum and Nebula series. But the joke of, because it was mentioned many times that there's, in the Midas City stories, you really don't see men mentioned, which is, I don't have anything against men, but I'm writing very women-centric stories, and it's just
and
forcing one in would just be weird.
A Catholic, monogender school is obviously a direct tie to that.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, I want to just tell the audience, because I meant to do this before, spoiler warnings.
Oh, yeah.
Spoiler warnings. So if you have not read In a Hot Second and want to know nothing about In a Hot Second until you have read it, hit pause now, because we are going to talk unrestricted about all kinds of plot points and the ending and all that stuff. Just want to let everybody know before we can, because we haven't really done that so far, so just know that we're changing gears a little bit in that regard.
I'm surprised we restrained ourselves for the earlier part. I was really expecting us to drop something from
Yeah.
chapter 2 of you or something. So
It's not really, our fetish is not really one of well, actually, no, I was about to say that, but I'm wrong, aren't I? Anyway,
I mean, it depends.
on
But
how you look at
no,
it.
yeah, self-restraint, just in case anyone's like, well, what? But no,
Ha.
you're totally right. But yeah, we have this very aware of the world she lives in Catholic schoolgirl who even references the, why do I live in a city full of predatory lesbians? Which
one of my favorite lines.
it was a thing. At one point, I realized, hey, people keep mentioning this the thing that everyone interacts with, etc.
Right.
I'm going to start making it so people are aware of it, because if not, this just means that everyone's really stupid. I don't want characters to come off as not realizing they live in the city of predatory lesbians. That would just be bizarre. Which means I also have to take a really quick second to thank Decker for stealing his city name, because Decker wrote Psych vs. The Lash and Psych vs. Fractal, a couple of others in the setting, and a lot of other great stories. And I shamelessly stole the name because it's so clever and brilliant. I mean, Midas City, making it so everything abbreviates to MC is just...
Come on.
I wish I would have thought of it, but I didn't.
It's a good idea. No doubt about it.
So we have Virtue, who very innocent, very pure, and I got the comment from someone of, when I read there was a male pronoun, because she's very religious, at first I had to stop and reread to make sure it was accurate. And a character that is, as mentioned, this is part of where I have to give credit, is that she's a very, Closer would argue that she's not as likable of a character as, say, Heart of Gold from In a Flash, a story that preceded in sort of my return to Midas. But I find that Virtue is an incredibly likable character, even if she could use being a little bit more self-aware at times. Her earnestness is just kind of infectious. I mean, she just kind of wants to do good things and thinks that she's maybe a little bit different than she might be, or that the world has influenced her less than it has. But she's got a very... she wants to study magic, she wants to be good at school, and she wants to be the best at absolutely everything that she does. And who can't kind of understand that I'm pushing myself too hard to do 1,000,001 things that I shouldn't even be trying to do at the same time?
Right.
And there's no way you can juggle that infinitely, and that's one of her problems.
She is a very fun character, and I think her sincerity is really one of, I think that's one of her more infectious qualities. She's really, really a fun character, because she is so earnest in everything that she's trying to do. The juggling things is interesting too, but another thing that is kind of related to that I really dialed in on immediately was I love the device that you use. Okay, and this will take just a little bit of explaining to get to my point, but Virtue, but what makes her a superhero is the fact that she has some augmentation courtesy of some magical artifacts that she carries. She's got a pair of swords, and she's got, help me out, is it a choker or an amulet? What is the thing that she wears that or she's got the ring. She's got the teleportation ring. And then there's a third one, isn't there? Isn't there a third item?
The mask.
The mask, thank you. Okay. So she's got the mask, the ring, the swords. And in order for those items to function, she has to sort of adhere to her namesake. She has to be virtuous. Walk through the mechanics of the magical items, because I think it's so clever.
Yeah, no, and this is a thing that this was so fun to work with, because, again, it was... I don't want to make it too much like it was my ideas, but I really fun with how it was to run with. But we've got the Twin Furies, her swords, which can only function, basically they're forged completely out of magic. So if you're not using the enchantment properly, you're basically hitting people not with foam, but probably with something more like cardboard.
Right.
That only work if you have a strong dedication to justice. If you stop working for justice, if you work against justice, etc., if some villain picks it up, basically useless.
Right.
And the ring is a ring, which I think also, if I remember correctly, has some just super strength and some other stuff thrown into it, is tied to honesty, which isn't just telling the truth, because that's too convenient, and Virtue's too mean to herself. It can't just be, oh, I can't lie. It has to be, being honest,
Right.
which means a lot of not saying things, because that's the
Mhm.
only way to be honest sometimes. And then the mask, which I believe is, oh, I'm gonna feel terrible. Its power is an immunity to fear, which is very important when you're a character like Virtue, who a little bit too pure for this world is a wrong thing to say,
Yeah.
but it's you have a certain level of not accepting what the world is entirely.
Yeah,
And that's who you
there
are.
is kind of a naivete about her, which is, you know, appropriate to her age, perhaps, but being on the
Integrity.
being on the younger side. But yeah, she's got a youthful integrity to her. So anyway, the point that I was going to make
Yeah.
is that I love the juggling she has to do with with making sure that she is adhering to the conditions required by using these magical items. That, you know, she has to remain honest, that she has to remain virtuous, she has to remain steadfast in her dedication to justice in order for these things to work for her. And I was thinking about, immediately my mind goes to, you know, how could a supervillain character, if they were to find that out, how would they turn that against her? How, you know, what sort of a situation could they get her into where they got her not being honest about something that, you know, like something that they're manipulating, and how could they then use that to depower her and further exploit her? I mean, my mind just went crazy with some of the possibilities. It's there's a rich set of tools there that you could use to craft some pretty fun stuff.
Oh yeah, because and the fun thing about that too is it's not just like, oh, I stumbled across this chest or someone lobbed a sword with me or etc. It's all created by the character in order to keep herself in check or to some sort of justification for her power, something to keep herself back. So it's not even a, you know, oh, I can't help but it's this. It's I built my own weakness into my power set, and that's just how I live now. And it is so just so rife with it, because if you think about it, it doesn't even she doesn't even need to be outright do something that we would necessarily consider dishonest, because of the sort of person that she is. I mean, you get someone, you know, getting her into trance enough and making her think that, oh, well, you do this, but you think this, isn't that dishonest? And you get that
Right.
moment where a character's all their powers are just that whole, you know, we're not so different speech has a much different effect when you're someone like Virtue.
That's true. That's very, very true. Or the, would you deny that this is turning you on right now? Like that whole kind of trap. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
oh yeah. Like I said, I don't want, you know, I don't want to insert myself into this too much because I'm having so much fun just reading it as a fan. But, you know, my mind immediately starts going to like, oh, you could do this and then you could do that. And, you know, it's
Well, I mean,
cool.
that's where all the. I mean, like Fly by Night over on the Garden and the Forum was responsible for a lot of things in the old writing, and not necessarily through the ways that you would have expected. So
Right.
responses always get weird things happening, and then of course beyond just the fact that, you know, she's got all this going on, then she also goes to the the Woodside Academy of the Sacred Heart, which is a brilliant name by Kel that took me a bit to realize until I just spelled it out as abbreviation,
Yeah.
because everyone refers to it as Wash.
As Wash. Come on. It's great.
It's so good. I mean, oh yeah, I have to go over to the Wash dorms, bye, and get, you know, mine fucked. It's just such a great. It tells you exactly what you're going to get from there.
Yep.
It's as innocent as anything else she's going to face. When we get to see the fact that I was kind of worried at first, not in a really worried way, but I finished Absolution this year, a story I started forever ago, which has a lot of heavy religious themes, and then I've got this story, which has a Catholic character who goes to a Catholic school, which is maybe a little bit twisted around the edges, let's just say.
Right.
Don't want to spoil too much about what's going to come out of that.
Yeah, there's definitely some foreshadowing.
Yeah, Sister Wallace is a very good person who just wants to make sure that, you know, Chastity follows the light of Mary.
That's right. As long as Chastity adheres to Sister Wallace's counseling methods, everything will be fine.
Exactly. It's important
her one-on-one
to have
guidance is, yeah, it's really helping.
It's important to have people that care about you.
Yes, it is, isn't it? As we laugh gleefully.
Oh, it really, really is.
Yeah.
And a thing that I really forgot to mention originally too, in the because I try and you want to mention some stuff up at the top, like the fact that it's from this author and so forth. It's just been really good, but I forgot to mention at the bottom of this one because I wouldn't want to spoil that the main threat that Virtue encounters in her debut is from the cult of Pyria, which I wanted to do something with the cult ever since like 2007.
Yeah.
They didn't really originally show up, but Ember did. And Ember's a fun villain that I always kind of regretted not doing more with because she basically got like 30 scenes and then disappeared from reality.
And now making up for lost time. I really dig that too. And now to be fair, I've not read the the prior story, where the cult of Pyria makes an appearance, or Ember for that matter. But I really got into him here. I something about the something about the I don't know if religious overtones is exactly what I'm trying to say here, but the fact that she being a Virtue, something about the fact that she by day is a Catholic schoolgirl who dabbles in magic in order to sustain her crime fighting at night, going up against a cult group. There's something about that seems very congruent to me in kind of a non-obvious way. Like, naturally, those two forces would seem to oppose each other. But of course, she's got a little bit of a foot like on each side of the the line of divine light, or whatever. In that she is adhering to all of these virtues and stuff like that, and yet it's set up immediately that there's this whole tension and everything, because the academy that she attends preaches specifically against the allure of magic and doing things the easy way, and shortcuts and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, I really love the juxtaposition, and I think that just conceptually having her go up against like I guess like a pagan religious cult, as opposed to just your garden variety Mediterranean religious cult is interesting.
Yeah, and it's been really fun to get to expand upon, because there's so like I had all this. Whenever you pull out something like that in your head, like if you say the goddess of the cleansing flame, you better have something more than just that line, because that's got so much promise. And I've done it before where I like have it, and you pull out this great idea, and because you have nothing, it can't expand. And thankfully, I didn't use it before, even though I had stuff, just because I don't think I was. It's sort of like how the way that Virtue works with this is sort of the way that a while back I was sort of looking at comics in a very like tearing it apart way. Because when I started reading Silver Girl, I'd actually never read a comic book before, besides like 3 like one-off issues.
Huh.
I'd watched a lot of cartoons, but I'd never actually like bought a comic book.
Okay.
And so I like got like Crisis on Infinite Earths.
That's cool.
In Identity Crisis, ended up having a trade around, so I read that. Ultimate Spider-Man's original run, not all of it, but I got through a bunch of stuff. And there's this thing you start to notice wherein sometimes you get the magical person who keeps running into tech, or the mutant that runs into human supremacists, etc.
Right.
But the most interesting people are always the people that are either directly opposed and just like you, or are what you would be if you were a little bit different.
Right.
And well, I'll admit, I was just thinking this would be a really good pairing, and I finally get to use some ideas I had. The way that you bring that up, the sort of, she's got her foot on the magic side that's closer to Ember and Pyria, and her foot over on the Catholic side, and the sort of the war there means that a little part of her's happy no matter who wins, even if she won't admit that to herself. And it makes for what matters more, her self-advancement or her virtue, which is like I think an important like thing to be like a war inside of her, or else all that setup doesn't really matter.
True. Yeah. And again, I mean, it's like these really fundamental kinds of things that just make characters and stories work, or not just work, but I mean, it makes them fun.
Oh yeah.
The conflict, internal and external. It gives so much, just so much material to chew through as you forge ahead. I want to ask
Exactly.
you about
Oh,
one of my things that I really dug in the stories. I really loved the device of the pink flame mind control, which the cultists, we don't know it when we first see them. Virtue stumbles onto cultists who have they've got some kidnapped victims that they are taking for some sort of ceremony, some sort of ritual that Virtue correctly assumes is probably going to be a bad thing. And so into the fray she goes, and she's doing fine until she gets hit with these pink flames, which don't burn her clothes, but rather create rather intense heated sensations within her body. And I thought it was a really really fun idea. I was just kind of curious where did that come from?
thank you. So, like, fire is this really oddly primal thing. It's not odd because basically, when you think of like, especially like, in fact, I don't even think, even though like what elements are important, you get different answers from culture to culture. I can't think of one that doesn't include fire in a very prominent role, or even like
Yeah,
hides it in something else. Like you'll sometimes get like wind will be inside of something else, or like wood is not something you'd hear in most European based mythology, but fire is pretty much always there. And also, like, basically, it's one of the most powerful things used in hypnosis a lot too. Like just hypnotic fiction, basically
yeah,
everywhere. You've got candlelight, you've got fireplaces, you've got all
sure,
this great stuff. And on the one hand, being in front of a fire feels really nice. It's really comfortable. It's comforting, protects you from cold, which is basically the opposite of fire, even though we like to think of them as different things.
yeah.
And then you've got this fact that we're reading porn. I mean erotica, but I kind of like leaning into the word porn. Like I'll say I write porn, and my friends will be like, "You write erotica," and I'm like, "But I want to say porn."
Yeah.
And we're reading
No,
porn,
I don't.
and
Degrade me. I write porn, damn it.
yes, and you've got all this wet, slick, hot. Oh, and I can't exactly say it came from that because honestly, with the way that I feel like if I said anything definitively as far as like original inspiration, I'd be lying because it's been like 8 years or something like that, and I don't know exactly the thought
Sure.
process. But these
Yeah.
days, it comes from a lot of what does fire make you do? Makes you sweat. And what does all the hot stuff that we like to have forced upon characters when they don't want it to happen do? Makes you sweat, makes you
Yep.
melt, makes just everything pour away, and that
All
making
of
that
the
mental sensation
yeah.
physical.
All of the adjectives and things that you would want to use, you instantly open up that vocabulary.
And what's more of a visceral image than something very important and precious being lit on fire? There's basically nothing. Because even if you run over to it and start patting it out as quickly as possible, I mean, what's the image that two images come to mind? One, you get the flame out and everything's good. The other, you pat it, you start like ruffling wind around, and it just bursts even hotter.
Right.
There's this threat that any interaction with a flame is just going to make things worse. And when it's inside of your head, you can't really reach inside of there.
Right. It's very interesting, to kind of hear your thought process on that. It's so much more layered and kind of thought out than just what haven't I used yet? And throw that in.
At the time, it
That's
was a
really
little bit, I think.
yeah. It's fun though. I love hearing about the creative process and how people kind of come to their creative decisions and stuff.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's always fun to get insight into that. Um, Leads to another great question. We've talked about Ember, who in this story is revealed to us as Ember, the avatar of Pyria, and obviously she's a formidable foe, as Virtue finds out the hard way. She's a very cool character, and far from simply wielding these mystical pink flames, gesturing hands or whatever. She's tapping into a much greater power that we get a glimpse of here. Are we going to see more of that moving forward?
I can actually even tell you when. I've been being a little bit mean to everybody because this year I've been doing a lot of writing, basically constantly. If I'm not asleep or eating, I'm basically writing.
Yeah.
And so I can tell you more or less until about June 30th, and then I miss a week knowing what's happening. But I've got a lot of things pretty well lined up. And I can promise that unless something comes up, like we miss an update or something, on June 2nd, you'll get to see more.
All right. I'm going to mark my calendar right now.
Go. I mean, I'd say that basically I've got something every update. So
go see the Han Solo film. Read Madame Kistulot.
And because there's other stories in the sort of what I'm doing right now is a little bit of well, not just a little bit, but like sort of world building and character building from different angles. Yeah. And if you liked In a Hot Second, In a Heartbeat is a good follow-up. It's not the direct follow-up that you're wanting right now, and it's kind of cruel because I'm kind of being terrible. But June 2nd, I will stop being mean.
All right. I'll look forward to it for sure.
I mean, you might get to see it sooner because I'm mean to everyone else.
Because I got the connect. It's a really fun story. I mean, I find all of your stories to be quality and witty, clever, fun, and everything. But I really, this one stood out to me when you and I were kind of talking about, which one should we cover. I was going to leave it up to you, but I was really pulling for this one. I thought this one was a lot of fun. It was a really great read. So if you haven't checked it out, and if you'd like to get a sampling of some of Madame Kistulot's excellent comic book genre, superhero, erotic mind control porn, you're welcome. Go check out In a Hot Second. That's not the only thing that we need to mention here, though, because in addition to the stuff on the archive, you got some other stuff you're cooking up too that I know we should mention.
Oh yeah! In fact, actually, more thanks go to you because a while back,
you're welcome.
At least like 3 months now, I was joking around with Callidus about how I really just need to write something ridiculous and throw it up on Amazon. Something like, my girlfriend's mom is a hypnotist, and now I'm not allowed to wear panties in her house. And Callidus just dies laughing. And I'm just, and for those familiar with the sort of the convention, it's very much a light novel title. I don't want to pretend I thought of the idea, but just it hadn't occurred to me that might be something that people who are familiar with light novels would be giggling at someone using the title, and then everyone else would just find it ridiculous and have to click it. And that sort of started a process of I basically instantly had to start forming a story in my brain to go with the idea, and it's on Amazon, and I'll toss the fancy link that means that no matter who clicks on it, it goes to the right place, because Amazon's so great. If you click on .com, you can't buy it. It's annoying. If you're not in the US, it's kind of weird that way.
Yeah.
And in just a few days, on the 10th, which this is probably going to be up after, just because I'm not going to hold you to getting it up that soon.
I think it should be out around the 10th, maybe a little bit earlier. We'll see.
If it's not, I'm not going to be upset with you. This stuff, we talk forever. In a good way. I love talking with you.
Seriously, I do too.
Great.
Yeah.
Is Mommy's Piano Lessons, which was originally just going to be piano lessons, but Kel was like, lean into it. It's almost Mother's Day, so I leaned into it. And that one isn't a follow-up to that, but I sort of decided that, people keep saying that the stuff I write is pretty dark. I'm not going to argue, because I kind of lean into it as hard as I possibly can.
Right.
But Amazon gives me a chance to do the exact opposite for fun and not really feel like I'm holding back on being terrible and dark. Mm-hmm. So if you read my writing and thought, it'd be really kind of nice if this wasn't so completely fucked up and twisted. I'm not going to say it's not at all, because that would just be failure on my part. But I'm M. Kistulot on Amazon.
I like these standards you hold yourself to.
Thank you. I mean, this new one I've got is actually, I would say, the most consensual story I've ever written anywhere on anything, which feels very weird to say.
What a yardstick.
I mean, I did write Completely Consensual Makeover, which was completely non-consensual.
Yeah.
But people thought it was. But I'll check it out. And if you like it, leave a review, give it a look. And I mean, obviously, no pressure or anything, but it's out there, and I appreciate all the support.
I also appreciate all the support, because I like anything that keeps Madame Kistulot in the business of making awesome erotic mind control porn.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're always one of my favorites.
Oh, you're too kind.
I know.
And speaking of favorites, though,
yes.
we have with us not just a podcast host or an audio editor, or I mean, Callidus seems like the kind of person. Every time I talk to him, I find out some new skill that he's got underneath somewhere in there. I mean, that website design is his, and I can't even think of how you make WordPress look like that. Is one of the
bootstrap.
best.
The answer is bootstrap.
Yeah. Fair enough. But if not the best, definitely one of, and definitely on the top 5 of people I've ever seen, and I'm pushing up the top anyway, because I don't care. We're on your podcast. Photo manipulator and video manipulation person, we've got in the fetish. Amazing work, wherein even having seen the befores with the sometimes of, hey, how does this one part look? And I'm like, that looks great. That looks a bit weird. Yeah, I haven't even touched it yet. No, I just had to comment. Just amazing photo manipulations, video editing. I mean, these things can move, and they still look like that was how they were designed. And for the others part of the shameless self promotion we've got going on here, we're going to talk about Callidus's Green Thoughts, which is the most, not the latest thing, but the first thing to come out since that hiatus, because
that's right.
Hard to be sexy when you've got things going on in your life.
Yes,
and tell us a little bit about what we've got here, because this is a really good work you've got, and just give us a little bit of like what you've got here.
Well, thank you for saying all that. Green Thoughts is a fun one. I think that within the list of things that I like, that I manip, I have to tell you that almost nothing brings me as much joy as brainwashing VR headsets and headphones. I love it. I love it deeply. And, I was thinking about this earlier before we started recording. I was just kind of thinking about what I might want to talk about in relation to this. I was trying to think of the first time that I ever saw that kind of combination together. And I'm really actually struggling now to think what it might have been. I know that there was a Doctor Who episode in which, I don't think it was the Romana character. I think it actually might have been the princess character that Romana ended up looking like when they just basically brought back the same actress in a different part. But there's an episode, I can't remember what's going on, but I think she's like the Cybermen are trying to brainwash her or something. But anyway, there's like headphones, kind of like clamped to her head, and I think she's maybe manacled to a chair or something. And like that's an early sort of, mind control out in the media sort of moment that definitely made an impression. And I'm really struggling to think of where the visor thing came from. It might even be, early manip stuff from, like, I don't know, like, Wild Rose or William Lee or something like that. But anyway, the point is, I love putting mind control contraptions on the faces of beautiful women. I really get a kick out of it. And I can't remember, like, I had a couple of projects that I was kind of, just dabbling on, like doing a little bit here, doing a little bit of writing, doing a little bit of Photoshop. And I suddenly came across this photo set of Kyla Green and Misha Cross. It's this sort of medical BDSM themed photo set from houseoftaboo.com. And Misha Cross is this lithe young redheaded woman who is strapped down to this table, and then Kyla Green is the kinky doctor, with the white jacket pulled open, revealing her body, who's playing with her. And it, like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, wait a second, and I'm kind of like looking at angles, and I'm seeing like, okay, so that's kind of straight on, and that's kind of straight on, but it's a little bit tilted up. I'm immediately evaluating it for, could I potentially find a VR headset that it's a similar angle and everything, and I could get onto this. And so I just kind of dropped everything and just like immediately jumped into this because I loved the idea. Well, and I guess I should back up and just say that as I was looking through the images, sort of like an idea of a narrative, like the idea that it would be a series that would take place over the course of 7 or 8 pictures or something. And it would just be a scene, like it would just kind of be this little scene that happens between the two of them, played out over several images with prose attached. That was kind of forming in my head, like as I'm looking through this and realizing, like, hey, I could use this, and then it could go to here, and it could go to here, come back to here, go to here. And I just got really, really excited about the idea of of doing sort of like a brainwashing laboratory, in quotes, kind of series. That was it.
And I mean, inspiration can come from a lot of very simple things to make really good stuff happen. And this is a great example of that. I mean, it's the idea of just, hey, let's just shove in a plant on someone's head isn't necessarily that complicated, but it turns like that first picture goes from, I mean, it's not like a very beautiful woman tied down to a hospital bed is not inherently attractive, but it goes from that to this flashing VR headset, because it's not, the whole set does a really good job of incorporating the name into it, that green thought all throughout. You've got the auras of it, the little subtle glows. Some people would be like, I imagine, like, as someone who doesn't do very much manipulation, I like do very simple like copy paste edits and like color balance and stuff that's like, I wouldn't even pretend to call myself a nipper in the way that you are. If I like looking at the first picture, the way you get the green flashes between her face and the headset, I would be super nervous about making a bunch of pixels stand out. And yet you lean right into that gap. How does like the compositing and the way you add the effects in sort of play in with that in this image? Were there any, like, how does that work for you when you're creating something like this, that gap, the difference beyond just things like making the colors balance up and things like that are enough to make me throw up my hands?
It's the thing that's kind of interesting about it is that there's like a real subtlety to it, because what you effectively do, I mean, what I do and what most visual artists do is you think like light. That's what you're doing all the time. You're just saying, what will happen to this object when light hits it? And, does it reflect? Does it absorb the light? Does it cast a shadow? How hard, how soft, what direction? Like, that's all you're thinking about all the time. Yeah. And the thing about that glow that's interesting is that it's counterintuitive in the sense that what you want to do with the headset to make it look like it's sitting on her face is you want it to cast a sharp little drop shadow on her face, because it can't be sucked directly to her skin where it's airtight. There's going to be a little bit of a gap, and so you want to put a drop shadow underneath that in order to just make it look correct to the eye.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have it, you might not say that's what's wrong, but you'll know something's wrong. And so it's kind of counterintuitive in that what you have to then, so you want to do that, you kind of establish that as sort of like the baseline. This is what it looks like, headset's off. And then when the headset's on, presuming that the display inside is bright enough, you're just trying to say, all right, so how much of that shadow ends up getting lit up, and then also not just light but also color. How much does the shadow get affected by the light coming from under the visor? And so then you try to sort of explore, an answer to that question, and then beyond that, it's just, and what would look cool? What would just, and also it's the subtle thing, but it's like you kind of want it to grab attention but not grab attention. Like it's more as opposed to sort of holding it up in front of the viewer's face. You want to sort of invite them to discover it, or at least that's my philosophy, I guess.
I think it does a really, really good job.
Thank you.
There's no way you're gonna start at that image and not have your eyes drawn directly to her face, and to be caught with the fact that, I mean, I wouldn't blame people if they would have thought that it started out that wasn't one of the things that you added in, because it looks very natural there with how you've got it set up, and it's the glow is really good. And the fact that you've got the text complementing that with I hadn't noticed, now it was optional glow, but the fact you've got that same green glow there, maybe not the exact same color, I've done perfect at that, but the same sort of thing going through makes it so that we sort of get a little bit more of a look inside of the character. But another thing that might not even be noticed the most in, like, if you're just looking without clicking on them, for example, at least with the way my browser is set up, is the work you do on a lot of your manips, not even just to the people or just to the sort of obvious scene that they're in, but there's a lot of work you do with screens, a lot of flashing, a lot of sort of those, it's not actually, but it's sort of like what we've been taught through media is like the sort of subliminal mind control visualization you get on like everything ever, which you do a really good job of.
Yeah, it's funny too because like that's one of those things. Like to me, like I don't expend a lot of effort on those generally speaking. I mean, like for something like orientation or decisive results, like the video pieces,
Mhm.
those tend to be a little bit more involved because they're going to be really front and center. But like I'm doing these as background elements, and so to me, they're kind of perfunctory in a way. Like they're necessary. They need to be there. Especially, if I want to call it an animation, it needs to have some bits and bobs that move.
Yeah.
But to me, they're really just there to sort of fill in the background, keep it from being static, and to also just sort of ground the whole idea that she's being mind controlled, and obviously the computer over here in the corner is running the software that's accomplishing that, and so there should be some visual cue that that's what's going on. The strange thing though is the reaction that I get to these things. Like every time I do a piece that's got something like that in it, I've got people that leaving comments and stuff like, oh, are you going to release that screen as a standalone thing? Like, oh, I'd love to get a close up look at that screen. And I'm thinking nervously to myself, I'm not sure you do, because I'm not sure it's going to be quite as exciting or impressive. Full resolution where you can actually see like how little effort is involved in it.
But that's the thing too, is that like, and this is speaking as someone who has similar things for myself in writing, though like grabbing at one very quickly would be hard
Yeah.
because of how it works. But like that's very little effort for you. And I believe that. I mean, a little part of me like sort of squids up and like goes, "No way is that true?" But I can believe that because of some of the stuff I've seen you pull off, like the whole adding in an entirely not there entity that moves and breathes with another animation. I forget the one that you did with the some sort of parasitic creature that
Oh,
was
I think
moving
I,
over
th- I
his
think it was,
chest.
I think it was Worm. I believe that was the
Yes,
name of the piece.
I like that one basically allows me to believe that that could be easy for you. But it's like as you mentioned, like indecisive results, and you're like what was the one in the Imperio series orientation, which is just
Yeah.
all of those are really top notch. The way you build up the all of Imperio and the ways that people are just so completely helpless to it, and the little things that stay even as you build it up work really well. But I can totally believe that you could see that it could be really easy to you, and so you just completely write it off. But especially in those animations, and I would say even in the still shots, just I mean, decisive results is one of the hottest things that we've ever gotten from anyone. So that's just I'm a little
Oh,
bit
thank you.
colored there. You're welcome. I mean, there's a reason that I've seen it stolen entirely too many times with other audio put over it. But the effort there in making the flashes work just right, making the text, making the timing with any ambient noise, the way that it all works out, it's very easy for that to seem very boring when you can make it. When you can just say, "Oh, I can open this up," and in like I don't know how long it takes for how easy it is, but the sort of equivalent of, "Oh yeah, give me like an hour and I can do this like 5 times or whatever." For everyone else, that's just magic. You're just opening this thing up, and you've got all these flashes that just. And I know that by now you probably know. Oh yeah, I have this for this many frames, and I do this effect to it, and I make this color here,
Yeah.
and oh yeah, this word would be good here. Yeah, slut. Oh, whore. That's really good. Like that's just completely normal. But I can say that like especially when you've got the sort of POV effect going on, like in the little sort of cutaway in decisive results where we get to see like what's been happening, and you see the lights flashing in her eyes, the little bits of the screens, and you get to take that look from her perspective. That's really impressive. And I could really see that even if it wouldn't be on the same sort of tier as one of your full productions, like I could see why you'd be nervous to say, yes, fine tooth comb this because you'll see all of my mistakes. Because
Yeah. That's
that's the quiet thing. You're always like, what is hidden because I didn't spend the time because it wasn't important to me.
that's it exactly. Like if something's blurry in the background, there's probably a good reason for it. But
And yet I believe there are people out there that would still love it. I'm not saying necessarily do it, but you do a really good job with those.
well,
They're
thank you.
really top notch.
I will confess to you that in order to speed things along, I recently I kind of had some of this stuff sitting around, but I kind of took the time to like organize it a little bit and kind of
Yeah.
tag some things and just make it easy to sort and go through and stuff. But I've got this kind of like a stock footage folder that's got, maybe 600 video clips of just all kinds of different like abstract patterns and things, things spinning around and spirals and cloudy thing, like smoky looking things and geometric looking
Yeah.
things and stuff like that. I just decided that, it could be really, really handy to just be able to, grab something out of here and throw it in. And that way it's not such a, well, number one, it's not such an effort for me to do something that's just going to basically be shrunk, postage size, a post stamp size in the background. But
Yeah.
also, if I were to, to want to do, if I wanted to comply with, these requests, which I should say that I'm kind of thinking about that like right now, like thinking about like, okay, so what would I do exactly? And would it be on my
Yeah.
site or would it be Tumblr or, whatever? Like those requests have not fallen on deaf ears. But the point is that by using some of these assets, if I were to put them out there, it might not be a total letdown for people for people to see that, since the stock footage stuff tends to be coming from high quality sources.
And then, of course, if you've got a huge set of things, I just got this funny thought of you make a couple of folders for your geometric effects,
Right,
and for the the shots of this and that, and you get a couple of D20s. And you just kind of make the sort of, so now how do I make this work? Okay,
That's
I've got
right.
5, 10, 3, 15. Let's make this work. Like, I mean, I'm not saying you should necessarily do that, but I could see that having some interesting results.
Yeah, well, that would be that'd be sort of like that'd be the fun random factor in throwing these things together, and and just for the for the sake of conversation, you'd be amazed the lengths I go to at times to to like try to make things look random.
It's so hard.
It's crazy. Okay, here I'll give you another little little thing. There's a particular sort of rhythm of flashing that I use quite a bit that I really like, because it's got like just the right amount of sort of like random stop and starts and sort of peaks and lulls to it in this sort of weird pattern.
Yeah.
And what it is like I took a camera, zoomed all the way in, and stuck it really, really close to the light on this hard drive that I have. And I was just watching this light on the hard drive one night and just kind of like doing its thing. And I'm like, that's kind of a cool light pattern. Like, just like sort of like the rhythm to it is nice.
Yeah.
And so I just filmed about a minute of it. And then, just like basically turn that into like an image that only goes black or white, which would be, transparent or opaque. And like, that's what I use to do most of the random, in quotes, flashes.
And that's the kind of stuff that I'm always telling people when they're all like, oh, but that's a silly thing to be inspired by. It's like, I mean, you can get a masterpiece out of a commercial. You can get a beautiful effect out of staring at a hard drive light. It's all just about noticing the world around you and saying, how can I make this hot for someone? And that's a great example. Also an
example of, like a person who really, really has their fetish on their mind, like looking at mannequins, in the mall, walking by and going, huh, that's kind of an interesting pose, and snapping pictures conspicuously. Yeah, exactly right.
I can't help it. Ever since a while back, after the second time I read that story, I can't help but slip out of Dark Forest to reference every so often.
Oh, it's so good.
Another thing that I've noticed too is that not just do you have the great layer effect of like, for example, in the first shot, just because it's convenient for this. You've got that the headset on there. You've got this just incredibly distracting picture, which is, it's got to be so convenient for the fact that that at least if you do make a mistake, most people are going to be so distracted by the great models you've got working for you, so to speak.
Yes.
But then you tie it together with the fact that it's not just this bulky thing on top of her, but it's got something tying it into the larger piece. You've got this connection that goes off in the form of the cord, which sort of also in the first shot works really well in sort of parallel to her hair, but it's also got its own shadow. It's got its own sort of composition. How do you make, like, because I'm looking at that and I'm just thinking, like, how many cords did you go through trying to find one that was long enough and bent at the right spot? Because I can't imagine, like, if I was going to do this, the low tech sort of way I'd have to do it, I'd be looking for like year. How do you like manage that effect?
Well, basically, I like taught myself how to like make chords like in Photoshop, just like from scratch, you know.
Wow.
And it's just like layer style effects and things because like when I first, and you can see like some of my early efforts are pretty. There's those banner animations like on the desktop version of my site.
Yeah.
There's one of those that starts off and like all you see is like a woman's feet and these really nice heels, and there's a laptop sitting beside her that's got a couple chords coming out, and then the camera sort of pans up, you follow the chords, and she's holding a VR headset and a set of headphones the chords are attached to, and she's got this kind of come hither look. Those chords, like I did those chords, and then after looking at, because I see that every time I go to update the site or whatever, I see that banner animation come up, just in the random cycle, refreshing pages and stuff. And staring at those chords for years convinced me I've got to find a better way to do chords because they're terrible.
No.
And so yeah, basically like pen tool in Photoshop to create, just sort of like the shape that's, and like I'm always thinking of like, what do chords look like? Like when you buy a hard drive, you buy a TV, whatever, like the chords always look the same. They're all, like you've got a short section, 4 to 6 inches long, and then it does like a 180-degree turn, and and it's coiled like that. Like it's never coiled in a circle. It's always coiled into, like almost like a cylinder shape.
Yeah.
And when you unpack it, that's what they look like. It's like they never uncoil straight. It's always sort of a straight-ish section. It's got a little bit of a curve, and then there's a short little section that's got a lot of curve, and that repeats. And I just sort of like played with that over the course of a number of manips over the years, just using the pen tool to kind of draw that shape, and then apply a brush stroke, and then apply a little bit of shading to it, so it's got a little bit of kind of like a light hitting it and then rolling off to a darker color and everything. And it's just step and repeat, step and repeat. But I'm proud of the chords in this one because the thing about this one that was really challenging is it's in the I guess it's in like the fourth image. There's a shot where you see like there's like sort of like a breakout box behind the headrest, and you see that the cord is like 8 feet long, or the cords, there's two, the 8 feet long, and that the headset was attached to this breakout box. And I've got like the cords coming, like they're draping down the back of the table to the tile floor, then snaking across the floor in perspective, away from camera into the background, and then coming back up this table to like where the headset's resting, like on this little cabinet. And I have to tell you that like that was the single most challenging thing in this entire piece, was that image, and trying to, number one, get the chords sort of looking right dimensionally in space, but also that they fall off in scale and contrast as they get farther into the background. They have to sort of subtly become more gray the farther away they are from you, and then also a little bit smaller the farther away from you they are. And like doing all that was sort of like almost every piece I do, there's some aspect of it that I really try to challenge myself, and that was the one this time. It was like, can I do this and have it look halfway okay? And then of course I hid as much of it as I could behind like an oval shaped vignette, because I was like, oh, I'm not so sure this looks awesome. But I was reasonably pleased with how that worked out. That was a little bit of a trick to turn out.
I think it looks great, especially given that just the pen tool, I don't know, like anyone that hasn't used Photoshop or never used that aspect of it, the pen tool alone is kind of scary to me. I can never get that thing to do, like, it's not, for people unfamiliar, it's not like, sort of a pencil tool, but different. I mean, I don't know exactly how to describe it.
It's a spline tool. Like more specifically, the pen tool draws what are referred to as B splines, and they can be a little. I mean, it just takes practice. Like you have to. You just have to like use it enough to know how it works, and then how it works, and then you can kind of make it do what you want. But initially, B-spline writes you, as in Soviet Russia.
And it continues to do so for a very long time. I took a course at the community college I was going to on just for fun to sort of, hey, I'll learn Photoshop and then I'll be as great as I'll. No, it's really,
Yeah.
really hard. And that just knowing that was made up of a bunch of those makes it even more impressive, because I wouldn't have even thought. I would have thought you just somehow found a chord. I'm not like trying to.
Believe me,
it's just
I've looked.
I believe.
Believe me, I've looked. If chords existed that I could use, would have done that. But there's just, it's one of those things. Like at some point, I said I'm going to have to learn how to do this, because there's too many times where I need to do chords, and I just can't. I can't rely on being able to find source images.
And another thing that's really impressive about this one, at least like when I'm looking at it, especially given that I got to see sort of the progression of this, two things really stand out a lot. One, in the first one, just how damn slick that is underneath her. And
yes.
the effect you get in her eyes, the way that we have, from just what little I know, it's not necessarily the most beyond the dimension sort of effects, but the way you get this sort of flowing effect in her eyes, and when she's latched onto the Doctor's breast, and that sort of the reflection of those lights and the swirl around, those two effects together are just amazing. And puddles and reflections are totally different things, and yet they're also both just way lights work. So how do those sort of play together with your process, and how this image particularly comes together?
Again, it's like that thinking like light, just imagining yourself as light, so like, where am I coming from? Where am I going? And what do I do in between? And that's just, that was kind of grained into me in college, in studying, Photoshop and visual effects and stuff. And so that's always, kind of the process. The puddle in this was, because I feel like I kind of, like, early on, what really kind of got me noticed, I suppose, over on the HypnoPix Collective, like the thing that seemed to sort of get people's attention, was an early piece I did, which is actually the very first sort of entry in the Impero series, called Nurse. And
yes,
it's the one, there's this woman sort of like kneeling, actually on a floor not unlike this one. It's this sort of white tile floor, and she's getting zapped by these two orgasm rays, which is interesting, because the Impero series has we've yet to see the orgasm rays come out again, but we know they have them apparently. And anyway, I drew this puddle underneath her, and it was just one of those things like, I wonder if I could do a puddle. And of course, it's a ridiculous puddle. It's like somebody spilled a big gulp of water on the floor. And but it was just a technical challenge to see if I could do it. And anyway, people seem to be kind of taken with it. And I've not really done puddles since. I've done like damp spots and things like that, but this is the first time I thought, I haven't done a puddle since then. Like, it might be fun to try to do that again. And so I went and looked at that, and sort of was remembering, okay, I kind of did this, and I kind of did this. And of course, I try to make a little bit more subtle, like not quite like it's 1 inch deep underneath her.
Yeah.
And all that. But the thing that was sort of interesting about it is that I did the puddle early on, and I'm trying to kind of do the lights in the ceiling, because that's the source. And at a certain angle, water is almost a mirror, and if it's not got ripples or waves in it, it doesn't distort the image too much either.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get the lights in the ceiling, and then also what they're passing past, which is her leg, like her inner thigh, a little bit of her butt. So anyway, I got all that, and I kind of got it put together, and I was like, yeah, I'm happy with that. That's a fair approximation of a puddle under a woman's ass. But then it occurred to me that her body is bone dry. In the original picture, she's not sweating or anything. She looks like she's in a slightly air conditioned room, and I'm looking at it, and it was so incongruent to me that I had to end up going and finding photo reference to layer in, both for her labia as well as her entire abdomen. Which I also took the opportunity to go ahead and give her a little bit of some abs, because I talk about her kind of clenching and flexing, her stomach muscles as she's, convulsing and near orgasm. And So it's kind of interesting how sometimes, and I don't know, this is kind of a maybe a esoteric thing to say, but
Eh.
You're always like trying to kind of like tell a story somehow, and so in this case, the story is so she's so sexually aroused that she's got a puddle underneath her on this leather table, and so you kind of tell that part of the story, but then you find things in the image that are in conflict with that story that you're telling. Like there's incongruencies, and so then that will lead you to having to do other things to sort of help tell the story, or so that everything's sort of going in the same direction with the image.
Yeah,
That's
no,
one of those
totally.
neat little things that like you do one thing and it begets another and another.
And that's and honestly, this is a little bit of a weird tangent here, but given some of the other stuff we've talked about, it's funny the amount of effort that we can get from an amateur. Like I don't mean amateur because I know you do this stuff much more professionally, but this is not like a huge production. You're not getting paid a bunch of money to do this, and yet people went back and redid all of the planet effects on like the original series of Star Trek. They'll mention there's a horrible storm and the planet is calm as day, but you've got this woman with a huge puddle underneath her. And I'll be honest, like I know I saw this picture before you added that because it was like when you were just working on like something with just the puddle itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't even tell that you had, like I needed you to point that out, and even still, it just looks so well done. You took the extra time to add that in. They can't add a cloud. Like I mean, I feel like that's. I'm casting a little bit of shade on how lazy Paramount's Blu-rays are,
right.
But also like the effort you put into that is like that's a lot more than people could ask for something that we're basically getting because we've got amazing fetishists that also have amazing talent.
See, if I can help make those original series remasters any better, I'm here to do it.
Maybe we could get like a big red outline every time the stunt actor's even more visible than usual.
I'm here for
but
it.
No,
I'm here for it.
But it's seriously really well done. That detail. I seriously, this isn't me just trying to. I could not honestly tell. And as far as that, like the point out little thing, that storytelling, the subtle little. I mean, the fact that you've already got this wonderful medical scene to play with was probably like basically giving you candy.
Oh,
because there's not
yes.
a lot you have to do to get a little bit of a story going besides having an idea to sort of weave through the narrative. But that visual language there, when you've got. Like when I'm writing, I can point out, the hooded eyes, the haziness, this and that, glassy here, wet there, etc.
Yeah.
But when you've got this picture already, and you don't you can add as much as you want, and you can change as much as you want, but you still if you chose the picture for a reason because it already had something there because you want to bring something out, etc. What other tricks are you using in this? Because the good thing about storytelling is if someone's doing it right, you're not even telling why some things are working or how things were different originally when it's a work like this. What other things are you using to sort of pull in not just the hotness factor or just the things going wrong, like from the sake of someone who's got a more moral absolutist view on mind control, but the sort of what other tricks do we have? Are we not seeing here, or are we not seeing, but our minds are seeing here as far as delivering us not just we've got this really sexy scene, but also there's some this woman is completely fucked. There's some things going on in her head. What other tricks are you using there?
It's interesting because generally speaking, the better the better the photo, generally, the better the photo, the more it sort of inspires me to to do things. But there's actually a number of pictures in this that have no touch up whatsoever. Like I don't think like when she when the nurse or the doctor character shoves her nipple into the subject's mouth. There's a few shots like that have almost nothing going on with them, but for those shots where we're seeing a little bit of a close up of Misha's face and trying to kind of tell the story from her perspective in those moments. Ordinarily, I do this whole thing where I light up the sclera in the eye, the sclera being the white part around your pupil and iris, and I that's just been my thing for years. I've done that since, honestly, I think I had a picture that did that in the very first batch of maybe 5 images that I uploaded to the HypnoPix Collective 13 years ago. So I've been doing that thing for a long time, and it's kind of, I don't know, I guess it's a little bit of a signature, I guess, because I always do it. But
Yeah.
the problem that I had in this was that if you look at those close-up, there's one in particular, there's a close-up shot of her at an angle. She's almost in profile.
Yeah.
And I went to go and add this effect, and I realized that it really didn't translate. Like when you can see the sclera on both sides of both eyes, it kind of reads. You at least get the idea. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's completely fanciful, but
Yeah.
It at least, like in my mind at least, it sort of communicates trance, and like within the visual language of my manips or whatever. And I really wasn't feeling crazy about it in this one, because the fact that in that one shot you really can only see half of one sclera in her eyes.
Yeah.
And so that led me down the path of, okay, well, I need to do something different, and that led me to the pupils. I can see both pupils, and that's an obvious thing, so I'll do something with the pupils. And so it started with just, some sort of like swirly light thing going on in the pupils. And because I had been using this, like the whole series has got like a bit of a vignette to it.
Yeah.
It occurred to me that it might be sort of interesting if, like, off in the darkness of the vignette, sort of at the edges of, what we're seeing happening, I thought it would be kind of an interesting idea if maybe there was something kind of happening in the region of the vignette at the edges of the frame that kind of coincided with, what was happening in the picture.
Yeah.
And I that's the thing, like I was thinking about sort of like the visual language of, sort of seeing things at the edge of her vision, hallucinating, whatever, or the way that oftentimes in stories, you'll talk about like kind of hearing voices at the edge of their hearing, just whispers that they can't quite make out, but are obviously influencing them. And I was just, I'm influenced by fiction more than anything. And I'm always trying to kind of think about, what would that look like? Like if you could find a way, photorealism be damned, to kind of give that a visual language equivalent. I'm always like really interested in trying to do little things like that. And that's basically what that was.
And that's a really good effect. I mean, it sort of calls to mind, as someone of a certain age, although this has basically been true across the board from about every generation I've run into in the community, certain colored rings and eyes from a certain snake are very influential.
Yep.
And while this isn't exactly that, it's the sort of
same idea.
I wanted to draw attention to that. Well, yeah, it's got the same sort of. It's something that, as you mentioned, completely unphotorealistic. You'd never see this happen, and it brings. If you think about like the biological mechanics, which I don't bring up to actually criticize, but just like it's fun to sort of sometimes stop and go, are we putting LEDs into her irises? What's going on here? How do we actually make this effect? Especially when you're doing a series that's more technologically focused, and yet it's very clear this isn't necessarily this is we've replaced her eyes with these bionic implants. The sort of visual shorthand you've got going for this light in her eyes and the light swirling around the edges. For a while, I tried to do a very bad comic using some pixel aspects to try and get out some of my ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think is done really well here is that way that the vignette here really feels like, even though we're seeing from a perspective she couldn't possibly be seeing, because she's staring up and we're looking side on at her, the haziness there and the inherent way that kind of a mental state is basically associated with that sort of tunnel vision, hazy eye vision, really is very well captured. When you add in that visual effect of those green circles floating around in the same, at least it looks to me like it's the same exact pattern. So, I would imagine it is. In her eyes, the sort of symmetry there is impossible to ignore. That was, especially given that you didn't have that other sclera to play with, I think that was a really great choice. I'm glad that it feels weird to say I'm glad that didn't work out like you planned it originally, but it looks better for it.
It's true. I mean, it's that old maxim about art out of adversity, Like, the reason that the original Star Wars movies are probably better than the prequels, I say probably with air quotes, is because they couldn't have everything they wanted. and they had to. So that sort of forced them to be more creative, and that's one of the things. I talk a lot about, like we said at the top of the show, about Uzubono. I'm very envious of her in a way, because within the confines of whatever model she can find, and her skill set and poser, she can do anything that she wants to.
Yeah.
And doing photo manips limits you. At the very least, you're limited by the perspective that the camera has captured. You can add up some track things, you can change things, but you are still working from the foundation of whatever is in the photo. And that's one of the things about it that is really fun, is that sometimes the limitations of the picture, like being locked into the choices that were made by the original models and photographers that took these images, sometimes being locked into those choices will necessitate a particular direction. And sometimes that direction means that you have to try different tricks, or just reinvent things. That's the part of it that is not necessarily obvious, but is very, very fun. That's one of the most fun aspects of doing it, I think.
Oh, and you're mentioning that in regards to Poser, I was just thinking, or when you have the computer I had when I tried out a demo of Poser, and you can't move the sliders for more than a little bit without your whole computer locking up.
I know exactly what you mean.
You really have to settle for not using Poser.
That's right. Got to go a different way. Time to take that remedial course in art.
I can totally make some pixel art. I actually did have a friend who did some amazing stuff with pixel art, and I know that I forget who it was that did some of ZKO's characters. It might have actually been ZKO.
ZKO is so, I love their stuff so much. Those are so fun. I'm
still such a good character.
There's something that I don't know how to do that I kind of wish I did. That would be really cool to be able to put those kinds of things together.
Oh yeah, it just makes me imagine, and this isn't what's been done, but it makes me sort of wish that someone that could do those sort of NES cutscenes level with that would just be, I'm horribly dating myself, but it would be beautiful.
I would love it. I would so love it. I would get such a big kick out of being able to do, well, okay, so back in the early days of the internet, like there were like a handful of pixel artists who would do things like they'd recreate fight scenes from The Matrix as if they were an NES game and stuff like that. And I've often had in my head that it would be really, really, if I had that skill, what I would be using it for is like bringing to life key scenes from, like Trilby stories or Tabaco stories or, whatever. That would be, like the confrontation at the end of Lord May when Thomas comes over and demands to see Emily, like those. That's the kind of things that I would love to do with that. I think it'd be just such a neat, an esoteric meme within a meme or something.
Yeah, that's just like my like big like totally blue sky. Just like if I could do anything, thing I've always wanted to do is an MC visual novel using the heavy dithering like 256 color you got with like early Windows 95 visual novels.
Right.
Because I don't know what it is, but just that really low color. You've got very vibrant, a lot of very obvious pixel shading. I don't know why, but that just drives me just like completely crazy in this way of like, oh yeah, I remember when I was young and downloading things that I totally had no business playing, and just that sort of visceral feeling that if I ever find an artist that I can reasonably work with to get that kind of thing going,
I will do it. That this just reminds me. This thought just kind of came to my head. This is kind of a moment of revelation, but and I'm dating myself too, but I mean, like this would have been back in high school, and my best friend and I we were both into computers and stuff, and we got a hold of a copy of some kind, like an early paint program. I think it might have been even called like GIF Paint or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I actually know that one.
And like really, I mean, this is like DOS software.
Yep.
And really, really crude. And he was a latchkey kid. Like both of his parents came home long after he got home from school, and so we used to always go hang at his house and get up to whatever we wanted to. And we were playing around with this GIF Paint program, and I had gone into a Sears with a couple of floppy disks because they had this screensaver program running on their computers out on the sales floor. It was just pictures of celebrities. One of the pictures was of Kathy Ireland in a bikini, posing like, for like a Sports Illustrated, shoot or something like that.
Yeah.
And we took that picture of Kathy Ireland into GIF paint and sat there and tried to like basically paint off the bikini and make her appear to be nude. And as we were talking about this, like that thought, just like that memory just kind of bubbled to the top of my head. And I suddenly realized that, like I got my start in photo manipulating far, far earlier than I realized I did. Like as soon as somebody gave me anything remotely Photoshop, like this is immediately what I try to do with it.
Oh, much more ambitious than just cutting heads off and putting them onto people, like
Yes.
in that crooked sort of way.
I've done some collage work myself.
I'm not going to say I never tried.
As the line goes, that's pretty cool though. We should do like a round. I was just thinking. I don't know if I've mentioned. I can't remember if I've mentioned Lewd ZKO on the show, but we should do kind of a roundup of some of their best little GIF animation things, and we'll put those into a future episode, because if you guys have not seen those are really, really fun.
Really good.
Naughty
because like you don't
8-bit mind control animations.
Because you don't need high fidelity to get the idea across, which is really the point with especially like mind control, because you can't, in a very visceral way, you can't really show the mind control part of it. Like you can show the commanding, the using, etc., but anything is just going to be a visual representation unless you've got like sort of a Terminator HUD with,
right,
move, etc. So anything is inherently that's visual, and then, not an insult to it. That's pretty impressive.
Winning.
Yes.
That's how we define it. It's you and Charlie Sheen and Tiger's Blood all together beside that dictionary page. Well,
oh, gosh.
I guess we should call it a show. Everybody, just thank you so much for joining us once again. We love doing these. We hope you guys have as much fun listening as we have talking.
Oh, yes, definitely. If there's anything that stands out that you'd like to hear more of, any sort of, subject, topic, something that we might have missed out on, because there's nothing more fun than finding out that you missed out on something and whining about it and then just diving in.
I agree.
Let us know, because we're here and we're listening.
That's absolutely right. Yes.
We can't hear you right now.
No, but we will listen later. Probably. Thank you so much for joining us. Do what Madam Kistulot says. If you guys have any suggestions for topics, if you got authors, artists, things like that you think we ought to check out, let us know, because we'd love to. One of the things we were kind of talking about in chat the other day is just how much fun it is to have the opportunity to highlight really amazing, talented people within the community, and there are a lot of amazing, really talented people within the community, and getting the ability to highlight those people and to steer folks to their work and just expose people to more and more of some of the amazing artistry going on in the erotic mind control fetish community. That's pretty fun.
And then we've got wonderful artists exposing people with their art. So we've got all kinds of things going.
Mwahaha. It's that kind of show. So thank you once again for Madam Kistulot and myself. We will see you next time on the Black Room Podcast. Until then, farewell.